we're going to talk about triangles, isosceles triangles. We're going to review graphene of lines. Prior to that, you have the equation 6 minus x equals negative 3y. Step 1 is to make this look like y equals mx plus b. So we want to get y all by itself. Divide by negative 3. Here's the negative 3 cancels. I'm going to bring it around. It's y equals positive 1/3 x minus 2. To graph this, we're going to start with what's called the y-intercept. At negative 2, my rise is 1, my run is 3. So I'm going to go up 1, over to the right 3. It's a positive line, or I could go down 1 and over this way 3. Either way, I get a positive line. And this is y equals positive 1/3 x minus 2. We're going to talk about isosceles triangles. Isosceles triangles. We're going to start first with the vocabulary of a basic isosceles triangle. In an isosceles triangle, you have two equal sides. Those two equal sides are called the legs. The hinge between the two equal sides is called the vertex. The third side that's not equal and opposite the vertex that's called the base. The angles connected to the base, these are called base angles. In an isosceles triangle, the base angles are always going to be congruent. You have a couple properties with isosceles triangles. First one is this. Is if you have an isosceles triangle, that means you have two equal sides. If you have two congruent legs, then the base angles will also be equal. How do you find those base angles? Is you go opposite the congruent sides. I like to draw arrows. opposite of the congruent sides. If it's isosceles, then the base angles are going to be congruent. The converse is also true. Go ahead and mark the two congruent base angles. Now follow those hatch marks and draw two arrows lightly. If you have two congruent angles, then you have two congruent sides, which forces that, again, to be isosceles. So if the angles are congruent, two angles are congruent, then you have two sides congruent. I recommend you draw those arrows to help follow which sides are equal. A third thing you need to know about isosceles triangles, let me label this again. Is that in an isosceles triangle, something called the median. The median is a line drawn from a corner to the midpoint of the opposite side, in this case, the base. So I'm going to draw a midpoint here. I'm going to draw a line which cuts that base right in half. That's going to be called a median. That median has two properties. One, it bisects the vertex. That means it cuts the vertex in half. Two, it's going to be perpendicular to the base or create a right angle. So once again, if you have an isosceles triangle, the median from the vertex bisects the vertex and is perpendicular to the base. Now, using isosceles triangles, let's practice a couple problems. In this problem, we see that we have congruent, if we have two congruent sides, that means we have two congruent angles. So I want you to use a straight edge or just draw a line. Follow the hatch marks. I'd like you to draw these two arrows. Follow the hatch marks. The hatch marks point to the angles that are going to be congruent. So in this case, I know that these two angles here and here must be congruent because of those hatch marks. So I mark them congruent. I follow the hatch marks over on the other side. And I see that those two base angles are going to be congruent as well. So now I'm going to find anything and everything that we can find. Let's start with something simple. Let's start with the angle that we have. If that's 110, we can go like that. and that's 180 degrees. So we can go 180 minus 118. I get 62. So that means this angle right here is 62 degrees. And then I look here, this angle must also be 62 degrees. And because triangles add up to 180, I know this triangle right here has to add up to 180 degrees. So I can go 62 plus 62, you get 124. And you take that away from 180, and you're going to get 56. So this angle up here is going to be 56 degrees. Once again, this is 62. This is 62. Right here is going to be 56 degrees. That was 62 because these add up to 180. I see here I had 90 degrees, so I'm going to take 90 minus 56. And this becomes 34. If you were to follow those hatch marks, these here are congruent. So that's x. So I'm going to go x plus 34 equals 180. 2x plus 34 equals 180. 2x equals 146 minus 34 both sides. Of course, you divide by 2 and you get 73 degrees. So this is 73 and this is 73. Now we found every single angle in the triangle. Let's try this one here. This one says, given that this right here, angle 2, is going to be 12x minus 4, find anything and everything that you can find. Step 1 is to follow the hatch marks. So I'm going to draw an arrow. And I see that these two angles here across from the hatch marks must therefore be congruent. If I follow these hatch marks, I can see that these angles right here must be congruent. So let's mark with what we can mark with. In this case, if this is 122, this adds up to 180. I get 58 degrees. That's 58. That's 58. Again, adds up to 180. 58 and 58 equals 116. So I minus 116 away from 180. And I get 64. And here I have vertical angles, so this is 64. That's 64. And I add 64 plus 64, I get 128. Take it away from 180. And I get 52 degrees. The last thing I can solve for here is I have another 180 linear pair. So I can go 52 degrees plus 12x minus 4 equals 180. I'm going to collect like terms. That's going to be 48 plus 12x equals 180. We get 12x equals 132. So we're going to try 11 times 12, because we know 12 times 12 is 144, so let's try 11 times 12. And there it is, check, 132. So we know x, in this case, must equal 11.